Hi, everyone. I'm James Protin. I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors for the podcast, Candelore's Barking Beauties, with 5 locations throughout the region, and His Place Coffee Community and more here in Menneson for hosting us.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Candelore, owner of Candelore's Barking Beauties, where our salon is your salon. We have 5 convenient locations, no appointment needed. All breeds welcome. Any size dog. We are open Tuesday through Saturday from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. We have 5 convenient locations: Elizabeth, White Oak, Finleyville, Monongahela, and Irwin. Love to have you visit us.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. We have a great show for you today. A good friend of mine. I've known this young man since he was a young fella, and I'm very good friends with his dad. We was a co-worker at Chester Engineers back in the day, so we survived some of the well, that's a story for another day. I'll have to get my man Jerry on here to talk to you about it. But Steve Toprani joins us today, and Steve is very well known to those of us that live in the Mon Valley. He's right now serving as General Counsel and Director of Risk Management for WG Tomko, a friend of the podcast. And he's also been in his illustrious and varied career, General Counsel for Roy Jones Jr. and TNT Promotions, which I was instructed explicitly to ask you about.
We could talk about that, sure.
He's also served as District Attorney at one term for Washington County here in Pennsylvania. And he's been an adjunct professor at California University of Pennsylvania. He's got a Bachelor of Arts from California University. And by the way, I refuse to call it Penn West. I'm not
That's
doing
not
it.
a thing. I don't think it exists
yet. I will
yet.
not do it. That sounds like a cheap trade school. I don't know how much they paid for that, but
I
we're
hate
not
to
doing
say it on the record, but it sort of reminds me of a penitentiary. I don't know how they came up with the branding for that one.
So, and finally, Steve, he received his Juris Doctorate degree from Duquesne University. He's the husband of Jennifer, who is much smarter and much more attractive than he is.
No doubt.
And the parents to Will and Sophie and Matthew, who again are all much better athletes, students, and all-around people than him.
Isn't that what we always want? The next
and
generation to be better.
That's what we strive for. But
I didn't know this was a roast.
It is. Apparently, this is.
I would have wrote better material.
And now you know why it took so long to get me scheduled to come on here, Jerry.
Well, you kind of
what I was walking
suspected.
into.
So, well, thanks for joining us. And once again, back in the co-host chair after a little bit of a hiatus is my man Jack Cadwaller.
Appreciate it.
You know, we took a little bit longer to get going because Nick had to take the shine off his head because he's got but we did it.
I would have wrote better material. If I'd have known we were roasting,
I actually saw him outside writing that joke.
I was like, well, you walked right into that when you came in and said that was a fresh shave. So it's like, we had no choice.
Mother Nature takes care of most of it.
There you go.
I have a good feeling about this episode. I mean, we're off to a great start. I'm happy to be on it with you guys.
We're real happy to have you.
Yeah, with the banter that's already occurred 30 seconds into the intro, hold on, buckle up. This is going to be a ride.
It'll be a good one. And the thing of it is, we all know each other very well, and we know the Valley very well. And this is really, calling it a unique part of the world is really, it doesn't adequately describe.
It's an understatement.
Because my dad always said that if he wrote a book about the characters he knew in the Mon Valley, not even Ripley would believe it, right? Mr. Ripley. So it's because they're just, but that's who we are, right? That's who we are. We're feisty, and we're just, we're passionate about life and about this place.
Prideful.
Prideful
people.
Absolutely. And there's people in other parts of the country. When I travel, you say, from the Mon Valley, and we built America. We did this, we did that, and I was like, when? What's there now? What are you proud of? And I think right now, and I want both of you guys to weigh in on this. What I'm most proud of this place where I come and where I live is the people.
Oh, 100%.
And the food. We have the greatest. As an expert in Italian food, we have the greatest Italian restaurants this side of Italy. There's no question about that. But no, you're right. It's the people.
One right down the road here.
Amazing people in this area, survivors, right? These are people that thrive, never giving up on their communities, fight on.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
And the thing of it is, the same things that our dads and our grandfathers taught us, we're teaching our kids, right? And now my grandkids, I'm a little bit older than you guys, but those values and those things that have been passed down through generations, that's priceless stuff.
Well, I think if we, as a people collectively, if we weren't that way, I don't think the Valley as a whole and the people survive the extinction of the steel industry, which was, how many thousands of jobs in a 5-year time? I mean, I might even be highballing on that.
Yeah, and it wasn't gradual. It definitely wasn't.
It was a shutting door. Yeah, they just shut the door. And
one of my earliest memories of childhood. I grew up in Victory Hill, a little coal mining community, somewhere between Carroll Township and Denora. And we used to play. I was born in the late '70s, and we used to play on the railroad tracks. I hope my mom doesn't tune in. But one of our favorite games was there was railroad track with a trestle that crossed.
Your mom's one of the few people that actually watches this.
She does watch. So sorry about this, Mom. Another confession. There was a train trestle that ran over Black Diamond Hollow, where the entrance of the mine was, and we'd like to run out on the middle of the trestle, see how far we could get and run back. I was about 5-6 years old. I remember probably 1983, 84, somewhere in that. We went down to run the railroad tracks, and there was a company there taking up the tracks, taking the trestle down. And that's just been such like a metaphor through my life I'm part of a generation that saw the earliest collapse. I didn't have an opportunity to go to work in a steel mill like my grandfather did, like some of my family members did.
Right.
That was a foregone conclusion.
Absolutely.
The greatest hope in my generation from our parents was you would get a job out of state where you could raise a family, earn a living wage.
You had to leave. You had to leave.
But I mean, something as simple as playing on those railroad tracks has been like a lasting metaphor to me that we lost something. But what have we gained since then? We've gained a lot too. Sure. And you're right. I mean, I think that's what defines us better than other areas of the country where you would just see forgotten wasteland. That's not what we have here. We still have vibrant communities that
absolutely
all around Pittsburgh. You had communities like the Mon Valley. Now, personally, I think the Mon Valley was just we had a little better character. That's just an opinion.
No doubt about it.
But you had small areas like this. And pilots, at one time, pilots coming off the East Coast would use Pittsburgh as a visual marker at night. Because it glowed at night. It literally glowed at night. Right. And you had all these little communities. If you came through the beginning of Monessen, coming down 906, from, I was 71, not quite as old as one of our people at the table here, but
not
older
pointing
than
any
yourself.
fingers.
Hey, listen, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because it's like
it looked like a used.
There was a period of time I didn't think I would make it this far.
Oh no, I never thought I'd see 50. But at that end of the town looked like a used car lot. I mean, there was that many people.
That many people employed.
It was amazing. It was, and then like you said, when you see it all start to go away, and Jamie, like you said, it was not a gradual thing.
Oh no, not at all.
They shut the door.
It was immediate.
Shut the door, shut it down.
It's like falling off the end of the table.
Yeah, and I think it. If we didn't have the character we have,
I'm a child of the '60s and the '70s, right? And so
you don't look that old.
I appreciate that, and I actually have to pay him to say that. But that's okay. That's okay. It's not a lot, a couple bucks. It's okay. But growing up in the '60s, and when I saw when I was president of the chamber, I saw some data that in 1964 to 66, those 3 years, Charleroi, downtown Charleroi, was the 5th largest economy in the state of Pennsylvania.
No doubt about it. I absolutely believe that.
In 1965, its peak generated $75 million in 1965 dollars. Think about that today.
Economic powerhouse.
Unbelievable. It was a mini Pittsburgh. It was literally a miniature Pittsburgh. And
Denora was no slouchy. I mean, Denora was, you had that 4-block stretch in Denora, no slouchy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a great place to be a kid because it was a combination. And for me, what you said about the trestle, that really resonated because for me, it's always been trains, right? Because growing up in Charleroi, you look at now, you get a couple of trains a day going through town, right?
Right.
Right. But back then, it was like every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, there was a train. It was constantly going. So that's always been the metaphor for me has been trains, hearing that whistle and, so it's a great place. It was a great place to be a kid back then. It makes me a little bit sad that when you look at my Caleb and Kenny and Will and, these guys that now, our kids and grandkids that are coming up and living, basically the same life we did, but it's dramatically different.
Dramatically different.
Well, their inheritance is a little bit different, right? So like our parents inherited vibrant downtown districts.
Right.
Their inheritance, I think, is somewhat more significant, right? Because they get that toughness.
Sure.
They get that ability to have resolution and resolve. Yeah. And I see it with my 13-year-old. He's got a tremendous heart for this community. Yeah. And
that's awesome.
That's from being raised here. And I don't think you get that experience in other bedroom communities around the country. I think that is what, as you said, what makes us unique.
And it's a differentiator.
As a people in an area.
Yeah, and he won't realize it yet, right? But as he goes forward and as he matures and gets on with his life, that is going to be a differentiator for him when he gets out into the world, when he gets to college and out of college and he starts competing for jobs and things like that. I mean, that toughness is huge.
Huge.
Right? I mean, you were raised by, like I said, a good friend of mine, and he can tell you, I mean, the engineering industry, for example, is brutal. It's polluted with smart guys and women, right? Smart men and women everywhere you turn, right? It's so competitive, but it's those guys and women that have the heart, that that can take that punch to the gut and keep going.
That's right.
And that's going to serve these kids very well.
One thing I think that we did have, though, and again, I'm going to date myself on this. It's terrible, but the Mon Valley back then was, I know this is going to sound cliche, it was Charleroi, the Magic City, but we had our own, it was inclusive. We were all inclusive. Like you said, Charleroi was booming. Denora, there were different parts. The thing with our generation, especially, I'm going to speak just from Kenny, okay, with hockey. He's been all over North America.
Sure.
So the Mon Valley doesn't hold quite that magic that, he's been everywhere.
Well, you talked about shopping trips from Monongahela all the way up to Charleroi, and I would say with some confidence that I never owned anything that didn't come from Charleroi until I graduated from high school and left here.
Right.
I can see that.
Just went right downtown. Everything was right there.
All here.
Everything was right
self-contained.
there.
You didn't need anything.
Right, everything you needed.
Several, and it wasn't just one place, several clothing stores, several furniture stores. I mean, Dukers, I think, pretty much had the...
they probably had the market.
Yeah, they had the market locked up, but you had several... You know what the thing, one of the things that used to, for me when I was a kid, define every town was the Torn Page here in Monessen, Mite's in Charleroi, and Denora's was, what was the Denora newspaper stand bookstore?
Andre's.
Andre's,
yeah, sure.
And you had, every town had that little mom and pop's newspaper stand bookstore. And you knew whatever town you were in, you hit that place. They had candy. They had everything you wanted as a kid.
Charleroi was Mite's was a classic because I grew up with the Mite kids, and but you could go in the front door on McCain
or
get your candy, shoot right out the back door up the alley to Fallowfield. It was like a shortcut. It really wasn't. We thought, wow, this is really cool.
This is awesome, right?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. I want to get into a little bit, Steve, if it's okay, about your time as district attorney.
Sure.
And start with what, you were in private practice for a while. You were successful. You started a practice. You've been involved in various successful private practices with some very well-respected firms. So then you decide to run for district attorney. What was the motivation or that decision?
That's a good question. And, that's one I've tried to answer over the years a couple different ways. I always had a heart for service. I knew as a young kid when I enrolled in college, I studied political science and history. Part of my motivation was to stay here and contribute. Right. And I looked up to a number of our former and current elected officials that were doing that. And to me, that just seemed to be...
We had a mutual kind of friend mentor in Pete Daly, who we just lost, by the way.
I was
tremendous dude.
I was actually just going to bring up Pete. Pete was sort of a role model for my early career. Cal U student, young mayor, elected to public office at a young age, and he mentored me. And, I never wrote down on my calendar, and this year you're going to run for district attorney the way that so many politicians chart their lives. I saw a need. As a younger lawyer dealing with the court system, dealing with the district attorney's office as it then existed under my predecessor, John Pettit, it was broken. And as I traveled around the community, people would say to me, boy, you should get involved. You should get involved. And I started to run out of reasons why I wouldn't. And when the excuses stopped, I decided to run. And I'll never forget, it was 2007. I stopped at my mom and dad's house, and we were sitting around. And my mom, I think I got there like 8 o'clock at night. We were having a nice little conversation, watching, I don't know, American Idol, whatever was popular on TV at the time. And she says, why are you up here? Like, why are you here right now? And I said, I think I'm going to run for district attorney. And it was in February 2007, about 5 days before nominating petitions were due. And she looked at me and she said, are you sure? And I said, I'm sure. And she became my greatest campaigner. And that's literally how it was launched.
You guys were door to door.
Door to door.
I mean, I remember, vividly remember, you were door
we
to door.
knocked thousands and thousands of doors all across Washington County, 67 communities. And we had no money. You know what I mean? I mean,
it was a grassroots campaign.
Resources,
yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to raise money against a political incumbent.
Yes, it is.
Especially one that had been there for 24 years, I think, at the time.
Right.
It was hugely part of your appeal. And that's,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was part of it.
I look back, it's a blur. It's funny because, when you read my bio, it's the last thing you mentioned about me. It was such a defining time of my life, and it was something that people still talk about. And I'm always happy to talk about, but it's become like a one sentence ending to my bio.
Yeah. Oh, by the way,
I did 4 years as district attorney of Washington County, but it was the greatest experience of my life to be able to bring criminal justice reform and systemic reform.
And you did some good things. That's what you really had an impact on that in that office that is still that we're benefiting from today.
I appreciate you saying that.
You have.
I had good people.
Sure.
I look at the people who served alongside of me. My chief homicide prosecutor is now Judge Mike Lucas. Yeah. My chief domestics and sex crimes prosecutor, Tracy McDonald, Judge Tracy McDonald Kemp, continuing to serve Washington County in a great way. So, as we always say, and I know this is your mantra, you never want to be the smartest one in the room. I was never that. I was capable, and I was surrounded by really hard work.
And that's why you succeeded.
And, they were able to help set a course. And, without the sacrifice of the office, we never would have been able to do what we accomplished.
Sure.
Now a decade ago, which is hard to believe.
It is hard to believe.
So, time certainly marches.
That leads to the follow-up question. Why didn't you run for re-election?
That's a complicated question.
Because you were successful.
Yeah, well, in the pressures were to climb, right? In 2010 or 2011, midway through my term, state party leaders were recruiting me for higher office. Talk about running for attorney general. I actually campaigned in about 22 counties
I remember
across Pennsylvania, meeting with state party leaders to see if that was an option. What was always an important value for me was to recognize two things. First, it's a public office. It belongs to the public. Sure. Second, the voters can put you in and the voters can take you out of office.
100%.
And as easily as when the wind changes.
I was elected at 29. My last year in office, my daughter Sophie was born. She's 11 now. And it was really just a family decision. We dealt with some issues.
Still the youngest?
Still the youngest in Pennsylvania.
Okay, I had to throw it in.
I will say there was a DA in Wyoming County who was appointed at 25. I think when the DA there had left office under some circumstances, but I was the youngest elected DA in Washington County in Pennsylvania history. So, that it's on my Wikipedia. I didn't write it, but it's on there, and maybe it'll be somewhere in the future memorialized.
Well, you kept reminding me before we started to bring that up, so I figured.
I
was waiting for the spot to throw it in.
I appreciate it. Thanks for getting the plug in.
Right.
But what, to be elected at that age, I was.
What's impressive?
One of the factors was I was fearless, right? And, the county's insurance carrier, my chief detective, would never let me be the first one in the door on a drug raid, but I was always number two.
There you go.
I was always number two. And I felt that leadership was important, not recognizing, looking back on it, that there's armed drug dealers behind those doors who don't want.
And that was a big issue for you, right?
Because it was number one issue.
We had a major drug problem in Washington County at that time. That was a huge issue.
It was a transformative period. I mean, we went from illicit street drugs to the start, really the crescendo that became the opioid epidemic.
Right.
And we went from prosecuting drug dealers who are gangbangers to prosecuting guys who wear white lab coats.
That's exactly right. It became white collar drug industry.
I think we had over 400 drug arrests in my hometown of Monongahela alone in 4 years. And those are significant drug arrests, not people
that's
that possess
right.
drugs.
That's
These are
significant
people
because,
that sell and distribute.
My Terry Lynn has been a pharmacy tech for 30 some odd years, and she's at Durkin's Pharmacy in Monongahela. And so all of that stuff, that was discussed, that resonated, at that time. And it was impressive that you took that on and tackled that and made a dramatic difference in that situation.
I didn't feel I had a choice.
Right.
8 weeks into my term as DA, my neighbors were assassinated in their home in a drug-related robbery. If that doesn't give you like a siren call,
and that was
action,
close to home. That was too close to home.
It took the state police a day to rule out that wasn't an attempt on my family.
Exactly.
So you don't get closer to home than that.
Oh, yeah.
That set the tone for me in a way that maybe without that, I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive.
Okay.
But it was a defining moment that if a retired school teacher and a chief of police could be executed in their home, it could happen anywhere.
In that
literally
neighborhood.
In a quiet neighborhood.
What we were talking about at the beginning we all came up through the valley. You, especially in the position that you were in, watched that decline and that cancer spread
rapidly.
And then it literally is right here. You know what I mean? It's right next to you.
Proliferate right to our front doorstep.
Yeah.
And
that's
that
crazy.
was my call to action, really.
Right.
And not that I certainly didn't neglect any corner of Washington County, but I made it a mission to reform our county drug task force, partner with the White House to get new technology to do undercover investigations and start here, because this was the battleground.
Sure.
If we lost the Mon Valley, we lost Washington County.
Right.
Because we have established communities and community fabric, but we also had a population that was susceptible and vulnerable to particularly
because of
opioid
all the
addiction.
things that we've discussed.
All the things we discussed.
And it's the rapid decline of the valley directly contributed to that, I believe, because in getting into, we touched on briefly your wife Jennifer, who is heavily involved and committed to mental health, and we're going to get her on here to discuss that. But the mental health of the valley probably took a more impactful hit than the economy.
Of course.
Right? So, with the job loss and all that comes with it, and that leads directly to what we're talking about.
Don't discount the physical, too. So, yes, while we had certainly a high number in issues of mental health related issues, it's one of the reasons why I got involved when I was DA in formulating a county mental health court.
Sure.
Because we recognized that the majority of crimes were perpetrated by folks who were suffering likely with undiagnosed mental health issues. And
undiagnosed, that's the issue.
Probably a codependency with drugs.
Sure.
Right.
But we also had a lot of physically injured people here who were going to their doctors, and pain management was a new concept.
Right.
And their doctors were saying, hey, take this little miracle pill. This 80 milligrams will allow you to resume life as normal. Not telling them, because Big Pharma kept and suppressed the evidence, that this was highly addictive, highly destructive.
Yes, absolutely.
And in that, when people could no longer get legitimate scripts filled and they could sell a prescription for $1 a milligram on the street, they did. And that's what caused it to just explode. And I've been a deputy coroner, a solicitor for the coroner's office since the day I left the DA's office. So I've been on the front lines with Coroner Worko in watching the opioid deaths increase. And it's a national trend. It's not endemic to here. We kind of get the Appalachia in general kind of gets the brunt of the focus on that. I mean, they filmed, Showtime filmed a series called Rust in these very communities.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Epidemic in a fictional town of Buell. But, so we've sort of become the national poster child for that. But it's not a issue that knows boundaries or parties or economic lines.
None of those things. It crosses everything. And let's talk a little bit about, you had mentioned the violent crime that impacted you, that happened to your neighbors, and it was obviously a tragic event, but that's something that has been, and hopefully, I don't know what the answer is, but let's talk about the gun situation in this country. One of the frustrations for me, and again, I mentioned to you that I've been a member of the NRA. I support responsible gun ownership, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think that there is a compromised position that would help us to prevent these horrific mass shootings that are happening, because we're targeting our most vulnerable population.
No question.
When I say we, I mean this, with these actions. And, as I know you're a responsible gun owner yourself, you've been a DA, you've been a crime fighter and all those things, but you're also a husband and a father, and your children are at a point where they are at that vulnerable stage, right? Because they're starting to do things without mom and
Absolutely
dad, you know.
right.
So give me an idea of how you process those two hats that you're wearing.
And I want to thank you for transitioning to a much lighter topic. No, this is important. My wife and I debate this issue in our own home. I mean, she is a mental health counselor. She probably has much different views on gun ownership and access to guns than I do. I was an NRA member. I received endorsements from political lobbies for gun owners' rights. And it's in the Second Amendment. You don't have to read very far into the Bill of Rights. It's number 2. I think the First Amendment is still probably our most important amendment to the Constitution. And I've tried constitutional cases in front of federal juries. But when you look at where our country is on the issue, I was a college freshman, I believe, or sophomore when Columbine happened, which changed the whole national dialogue on gun ownership.
Everything changed.
To the multitude of school shootings that have occurred and mass shootings that have occurred since. And mass shootings are defined as shooting more than 2 or 3 people. Right. We've had a proliferation of that as well. Sure. I think about my son. He's, my oldest son, Will. We like to shoot sporting clays together. Bought him a shotgun when he was like 11 years old. He and I have shot guns together. He knows how to treat them responsibly. Sure. I keep it locked in a cabinet in my house. He's never asked for the key, never asked to handle it outside of doing that task. It's hard to say, but one of the more recent school shootings, I was interviewed by the Valley Independent because when I was on the school board in Ringgold, we worked hard to bring in uniformed police officers as a deterrent and a check to provide security. Right. As a former prosecutor and a law enforcement official, I thought that was crucial and necessary. But I was talking to him, and it made a quote in the newspaper. He said to me, Dad, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Right. And it struck me right to my core that my 7th grader anticipates, not in his wildest dream, but he anticipates an event happening in his school, which isn't specific to Ringgold. It's specific to our culture and our society. So we want to take our
volumes.
We want to take steps to protect that. Right. We want to take steps to there should be no children's lives lost in a school setting, period, ever. Right. But it's a politically charged issue. And you have people on one side of the spectrum that want to criminalize gun ownership, which is the wrong message for responsible gun owners. Absolutely. Then you have the folks that the NRA pumps money into that says the Second Amendment shall not be abridged, right? There should be no restrictions whatsoever. Right.
But the Second Amendment also is open to interpretation as well,
the whole
right?
Constitution is. It's designed to live. I just gave away my political theory, but it's designed to live.
It's designed to live. And you can't remember that it's almost a 250, however, year old document that has not always moved with the times. Right. And we're in a dramatically different place than we were when the Second Amendment was written. But at the end of the day, that aside, one of the things that distresses me about it, and again, as a responsible gun owner, one of the things that distresses me is that the word patriot has been associated with owning a gun. Right? If you own a firearm, if you own a gun, you're a patriot. You're a patriot. That frustrates me.
I'm not certain that's the definition of patriotism in modern America.
You're exactly right, and I think a lot of people, gun owners who don't accept that responsibility, have attached that word to owning a gun.
Look, it's an easy way for people of that persuasion, right, to show to the world that they're patriotic, right? It's easy, and I've had cases when I was DA where people would. Pennsylvania is an open carry state, meaning you don't need a permit to carry a firearm as long as it's visible. Right. And they would walk into post offices and walk into voting polls and do different things to provoke authorities.
Yeah, you're crossing. You're almost
in areas where guns
pushing the envelope.
Where gun possession should be restricted.
Right.
that's the problem with both sides of the political coin, is that there's such a push to go in either direction. And we've also shifted the dialogue away from what the real issue should be. We've allowed a particular style of weapon to become our sole focus, like with the AR-15.
Right.
People call it a sporting rifle. I own 3 of them. One was actually custom manufactured here in Monessen by Three Lions Armory. That's a shout out to Dave Feehan if you're listening. To me, it's something that we use for sport.
Sure.
We shoot it, target shooting. I didn't buy it for the purpose of defending my home. I have a shotgun for that, which is probably more effective. But we've allowed the dialogue to shift so far away from who should own guns and under what circumstances.
And that's the issue.
That's the issue.
It's not
that's
the weapon
single
itself.
Issue.
The issue
we
is that.
focused on the weapon. And that's the easiest thing in the world to rebut, because the pro-gun folks will say, well, guns don't kill people. People kill people. We've all heard that.
Sure.
Well, why do people kill people? That's a question I've always wanted to answer.
Is it well, okay, you were talking about, you said your son, your 7th grader. Now, our age group, Jamie, we'll
include Jamie. He had a flintlock.
But I have family in Fallowfield and Bentleyville.
Sure.
So these people have been waiting on a civil war for about 100 years now.
No question.
So, but what you have now, like you said with your 7th grader, and I have a 16-year-old, Caleb, and the rest of them.
Sure, absolutely.
Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Fortnite.
Yeah.
We
Does
have
it desensitize?
Yeah, we've desensitized. It's bordering on, have we desensitized, or are we almost not glorifying or Hollywoodizing, but
sure,
where is this going to? It takes a 16, 17, 18 victim mass shooting to throw up a red flag. How much?
And then we move on to the
next one. Then we move on to the next one 8 months later, 9 months later.
To your point, the frightening thing is that in these are, for the most part, being perpetrated by children themselves.
Children.
18, 19, 20-year-old young men who are doing this. And it's like...
There's a demographic.
Absolutely.
They share
100%.
And I think it ultimately comes back to... Jennifer, I'm agreeing with you on this. It's a mental health issue.
It is. It most definitely is.
It's a mental health issue. For whatever reasons, even though we have mandated reporting laws, particularly in Pennsylvania, and most states do, schools aren't quick to identify and share with law enforcement in instances. I've thankfully never had to deal with a school shooting during 4 years as DA, but I did deal with plenty of cases where weapons were brought into schools that we know. That if given the opportunity could have changed dramatically.
Exactly.
Early intervention's the key. Comprehensive background checks are the key. I know a lot of people would find that like politically upsetting to hear, but look, you have to take a test to get a driver's license. You have to take a test to get a hunting license. How is it when you just attain a certain age, you can walk in a gun store without any waiting period and buy a deadly weapon with ammunition without any background or training in it? I was fortunate. I used to shoot with the state police when they would qualify, right? I've taken my son to shoot with police officers.
Sure.
I'm not saying that you have to have a badge to possess a firearm. I lawfully own. I no longer have a badge. I framed it because I was probably using traffic stops too much. But, I do think there has to be some level of screening.
I agree.
And I think do we want to self-police? Do we want to report our neighbors? But you know what? If somebody's acting erratically and they're withdrawing from society and they're ideating, and that's the thing. That's a common thread of all these school shootings, in mass shootings in particular. The shooters are forecasting their events.
There were warning
putting
signs.
Them on
There
social
have been
media
warning
blogs.
signs. Yes.
They're putting them on sites and they're announcing what their intentions are.
Right.
And people read that and they don't report. They don't do anything with it.
That you got to be able to recognize the red flags, and that's. I think some of it falls on parenting. I think some of it, but I definitely agree with you and Jennifer, and we'll get into how you managed to pull that off with Jennifer and that's another story because, come on, man, I've met her. Okay, it's like, but anyway.
And if I told you how I met her, you wouldn't believe it. I met her on a tour bus when I was 21 years old, and she was soon to be 20 in Paris, France. So I drug her back from Paris. And listen, she is the foremost convert to the Mon Valley. She may have a greater Mon Valley card than I do.
Yeah, because she's like from Kentucky, right?
Yeah, she's from Kentucky originally, but she.
You know what? I got to
she
call you
loves
on
it
that
here.
one. It's
Oh no, listen.
Because I'll tell you this admittedly, I floated the idea, like, maybe we could try some new scenery. And she's like, what are you talking about? It's Mon Valley. This is your home. Like, we don't leave it. I'm like, wow, she's definitely drinking the river water.
right.
I love it. Well, we're going to talk about family in a second, but just to tie off the gun thing, and thank you for going there, because I know it's a very politically charged issue, and
I'm not
just
sure
all
if,
the way around.
I'd run for the legislature a few years ago.
Sure.
I'm not sure if I was sitting here as a political candidate, I would give those remarks.
Right.
That's how polarizing the issues become.
That's
And we have
100%.
one-dimensional voters. And look, I'm not criticizing any of our elected officials, but if you have the ability to legislate a solution to this problem, you should have the ability to talk openly and frankly about it. But
I
the
agree.
pressure is not to do that, because let's say I'm in the middle of a political campaign and somebody's listening to your podcast in an hour from now. There's a chance whoever I'm running against will get a large PAC contribution, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 from
Right.
whatever group has the opposite view I do.
That's exactly
Right.
right.
And they weaponize the political system.
And it's
that's
unfortunate.
the issue.
It's unfortunate, and it's not just around the gun issue. We could
It's a
talk
lot
about
of
Roe
issues,
versus Wade,
which
we
we're
could talk
not
about
going
right
to
now.
today,
No,
right?
no,
Okay.
no. We're not
I
going
didn't
to
know
talk
if that
about
was
that.
another segue.
No.
No.
We're not going to talk
No.
about that. I'll talk about that with Jennifer, but not you. You wouldn't have.
I shouldn't have an opinion on it. You know why? Because I can't carry
Exactly.
a
There's
child.
nothing
So
for
I
us
just
to
gave.
talk about.
Listen, I think I just gave away my opinion on the issue.
I think I'm going to call in sick for that episode.
Yeah, that's
anyway.
Yeah, no, we're not going to. That's
Now,
not what we're going
where's
to talk
the
about.
where's the button to turn these microphones off? That's
Why is it though? And this you it was a really great statement though. Why is it that we are so? There's this duality where we're so callous to some things and we're so
Passionate
damn
about the other stuff.
sensitive
Right to
about other
others.
things.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can say one word, literally one word, and drop the room.
Well,
social
yeah.
media.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's
We're
the-
very
you just-
sensitive. to
social
everything.
media and modern politics
and now
has just
everybody's
changed
looking
everything.
at you like, I can't believe Steve just
Yeah.
just said that.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's a risky thing
Yeah.
to say.
And
It's
you
risky.
should be able to say with as much transparency as we have with social media, with what do we have? 4 or 5 legitimate venues of social media. You should be able to track the red flags of these people. You should be able to say this, that, the other thing. It's not so much the automatic weapons, sub-automatic weapons. We're talking about handguns. Chicago, look at some of the Chicago crimes. How many of them?
Sure.
Blunt force
Ghost
trauma.
guns.
We're not-
Ghost
we're not
guns are
talking
the
about-
newest thing.
Yeah.
Single shot 3D printer made ghost guns. Are probably the
Exactly.
greatest at the life in limb in America today.
I mean,
Right.
nobody is talking about, and this is going to sound really odd, but nobody's talking about knives and bricks and bats or anything like that are people are still being killed with.
we still have to address.
We're still committing crimes.
We still
with
have
these
to
things.
address the motivators and stressors that cause people to kill.
Right,
And what I
right.
was going to try to tell you earlier, when I was DA, I looked at this. I prosecuted and solved cold case homicides. The most difficult thing to do in proving a cold case homicide is sometimes you don't have a body.
Right.
Right. So you have to rely on circumstantial evidence to show
Yeah.
why that perpetrator committed the act they did. And I found people kill for like 3 or 4 main reasons. One, there's the professionals, right, that do it for a business or opportunistic
Right.
reason. There's folks that do it out of heat of passion, right?
Broken heart.
They walk in on their cheating
Right.
spouse.
Broken heart.
There's people that just have really bad days, really bad days. And that's where the mental health, I think, comes in.
Right.
Because, look, people carry whatever demons and conflict with them.
Yes.
Most people could work past those urges. It's the folks that can't because of a chemical imbalance or drug addiction or both that
Right.
never have that voice of reason that pulls them back,
Yes.
right? The devil and the angel on your shoulders.
Yeah.
They
Let's
just
be
have
honest.
the whispering voice that says go forward.
Even the
Those are the folks we got to find and treat.
even the
Right.
business killers
Right.
and the broken hearts. Let's be honest. There has to be a little bit of mental instability.
Yeah.
To be a high functioning sociopath, or
You're
you know
right.
what I mean?
It starts there because, and you referenced Big Pharma earlier, but think about how we over medicate ourselves as a society.
Oh,
right?
my gosh.
I mean, it's just like even physicians, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but it's so easy to just write a prescription. Somebody comes in, they've got a problem. Well, here, take
It's
this.
immediate. It's immediate.
Yeah.
And then you take out the other factors, with drug dealers.
Sure.
And all those things. But, I think you're right. I think we do tend to over-medicate. We don't look to resolve issues in other ways.
Mask them, cover them up a little
and look,
bit.
I mean, it's a profit center for
Nobody
multi-billion-dollar
Nobody wants to
global
hear
companies.
anybody whine at this point. If you go in and you say, I'm sad, okay.
I have something for you.
Yeah,
Here,
take this.
Try this.
Yeah. Well, I'm sad. Well, why are you sad? Well, I'm sad because of this and that. And I hate to say it, but sometimes it's, you know what, toughen up a little bit.
Well,
You know what I mean?
to
Not
do
just,
that.
you have to, okay, let's
Life
work
is
through
combat.
it. Yeah.
Life is combat.
Right, let's work through
Yeah.
it. But they, like you said, Jamie, they
it's
were
a
so fast
It's a
to
struggle.
say, take this for a month, and if you're still sad, I'll up the milligrams or we'll go a different
Yeah, we'll
direction.
tweak it.
I don't
Try
have a
something
problem
different.
with anybody asking for help. I think everybody, if you're struggling, you should definitely reach out and ask for help.
Without
I mean,
question.
But we still stigmatize it.
we stigmatize.
And that was,
100%.
that was a fundamental shift that I had during my time as DA, right? Because particularly when you're an elected Republican district attorney in a county like Washington, you hear phrases like tough on crime. What does tough on crime actually mean? I moved to thought and a theory of smart on crime. Like you
There you
have to
go.
treat the underlying
Tough on
issues.
crime's that crime dog. What's his name?
Right,
McGruff or
that's
whatever.
easy. That's just locking
yeah.
people up and throwing away
Right.
the key and warehousing
right.
a big segment of our society that the other segment of our society pays for with taxes for
Right.
the
And you're
rest of their
ignoring
lives.
the piece that
the
we're
underlying
talking about.
issue.
Right.
But for those early years, I remember when we started expanded drug treatment court in Washington County and added mental health court. There was a lot of instances where police weren't in favor of a defendant being referred to one of those programs. They
Sure.
committed a crime in my jurisdiction. I want them locked away. Was that the
Right.
right answer? For some criminals, yes. But for
Right.
the vast majority, no. Let's
Right.
give them the supports that they need. I've heard it in houses. I've debated it across people's dining room tables.
Yeah.
Every family's had somebody in their household deal with addiction.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
how many like talking about it?
Right.
Right.
Virtually
Right.
none. It's starting to happen. And I give credit to the people that are providing those resources in our communities, SPHS and others, Jerry Pagano, all these
And
people
we
that
had
are
them on the
taking
show.
steps, right,
Yeah.
to say it's okay to seek help
Absolutely.
without fear of reprisal or stigma or consequence.
That's it. That's just it.
So
Listen,
we need to change that too.
I've struggled with depression probably most of my life, but for about 20 years that I've acknowledged, right? And I probably was happening long before that, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my early 40s. After literally my entire life collapsed, just imploded and exploded into flames, right? So then it was like, okay, maybe it's me. You know
Jamie,
what I mean?
I got to tell you too, the level of candor which you speak about. I mean, I follow you.
Well, but you know something?
But if that message hits one person in their heart and they make a change,
That's the point. That's why we're doing this right here today.
It's
right?
good work.
So the stuff that you're saying and that we're talking about, if one person watching this, other than your mom and my mom, okay,
she tuned me out when I said I walk across that trestle. So Darla, please tune back in.
She's
She
probably
may
on the
never
phone.
knock.
She's been in the Bible ever since.
She may never knock on another door for
she's
me
texting
again.
Swaggy as we speak. What am I going to do with him? But somebody approached me the other day and thanked me for being transparent and being open. I said, well, don't thank me for that. We all need to be doing that.
You're right.
Right? We all need to be doing that. And quite frankly, had I accepted things and asked for help sooner,
Right.
all that stuff, that bad stuff,
Probably
that
could have avoided
I
20
could-
years of suffering. Right?
Exactly right. You're exactly right.
And
So-
I don't want to hit a hot button with this too, but it's going to sound sexist, but it's cliche that it's harder for men.
You really are a
It's
jerk.
just
You know that.
I am a
You
jerk.
really
Do
are
you know the
just a jerk.
highest suicide rate? I just read this the other day. In America is 40 to 45-year-old white men.
Yes, absolutely.
I never thought that was the case.
Absolutely.
And I hate to be right in the middle of that demographic, but
How would you like to be on the tail end of that demographic?
but no, I mean that was something that was unexpected to me. And
Yeah.
I was reading
Right.
an article. I kind of read on Twitter in the afternoon, see what's going
Yeah.
on in the
Right.
world and volatile sources. But that's
But-
that's something that again
Yeah,
is
When I first
unspoken,
started
unrecognized.
reading his blog, and I'd known him for some time, and we friended each other on social media, and I read his blog, and the very first blog I read was an open Jamie Protin, wide open. And I read this whole thing, and it's several paragraphs, and I'm thinking to myself, me,
checking the boxes,
yeah,
right?
me, and I'm like,
and it's amazing how many people tell me they can relate.
Oh.
Right? And that's kind of like the motivation to do it. Now, Terry Lynn will tell you, I mean, first that I overshare.
My only question is, how do you do that before 6 a.m. every morning?
I get up at 4.
He's a machine.
I just get up, and you know what? But I talked about this last night. Somebody said, because Jack, he'll tell me, like, every once in a while I'll get a call or a text from him at like 5 a.m. because he knows I'm away, right? And I have a couple of buddies that do that.
By the way, you guys are free to text me because I'm at that age now where I get up to pee at like 4 in the morning. I never thought that would happen. I didn't think that was a thing.
I'll text you at 1. I'll text you at 1 because that's usually my first trip, and then I lay back down for a couple hours.
Take
all right, you know what? I'll drop all pretense. I get up at 1 too.
Right.
My wife's like, "What are you
Nick
doing?"
has no idea what we're talking about on that one. No idea.
He's laughing. But
young man.
There's changes that will occur in your lifetime that happen a lot faster than you want to believe.
And you know what's funny?
Oh my God, I just turned into my dad. You watched me transform to Jerry right in front of your eyes.
Well, but listen, let's talk about Jerry for a second. He is a freak. Listen, I know it drives you crazy when Darla calls him her Italian stallion, but let me tell you something.
Where's the off button?
My man is a freak. Listen, Jerry's about 10 years older than me. He's ahead of me, as I'm older than you guys. But Jerry's a stud, man. What he went through recently with the transplant and everything, and I mean, he bounced back like bam.
Let me tell you something. He's probably not gonna be happy I say this. My dad suffered with liver disease for about 7 years before he was transplant eligible, knowing all that time that was his fate. The surgery was performed about 72 hours, they said, and what his life expectancy would have been.
Oh, yeah.
So he's on borrowed time. But my dad he was so private. He never wanted to discuss it with anybody. Right. And when we were getting close.
And I knew him through all that. I didn't know.
Sure. Nobody knew. And don't feel badly about that because for years I didn't know. That was my dad's, just personality.
It's just who he is.
He carries things quietly. It's his burden to carry, not mine.
Right.
And I tried to donate. And for physical reasons, believe it or not, our livers were incompatible. So they weren't able to use mine. And thankfully his godson came forward. But we made the first public announcement. My mom and I both made Facebook posts. It was like, if anybody would be willing to look into donating life, would you do it? So, he's been a quiet hero in our family for a long time. My dad says I never say anything really nice about him. He's my role model, and I hope to be half the man that he is. Well, the fact that he's carried it so quietly caused a lot of people in our community to pay attention.
Yes.
And what's cool is I get messages, my dad does, particularly on Facebook, which he's new to Facebook, by the way, does not know how to use it, at all. I have a recurring post on my Facebook. It's called Technology for Seniors. And it really just covers what my parents, how they misuse their electronic devices. But he gets messages from people that say, look, I changed my driver's license status to
that's awesome.
living, I want to make a donation.
Kenny just got his.
And that's just, that's an incredible gift.
Absolutely.
Kenny just got his license 2 weeks ago, and my wife, I haven't seen him for 2 weeks since he got his license.
He's out driving. That's what he should be doing.
But what he told me at a hockey tournament last weekend? I saw him and I said, Deuce, your dad coming up. He said, ever since I got my license, he's just lazy. He won't do anything.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I couldn't sneak into the car if I wanted to. But my wife came home and he left, and we're in the kitchen, and she said, "You know what he did?" And she said, "I didn't push him. I didn't do anything." And I said, "Oh God, what? You know what I mean? All right, what did he do?" And I'm thinking, he dropped something in front of the cop, or said something wrong, and she said he put down organ donor.
Good for him.
Did you talk to him about that? And I said, "No, I didn't." And she said he put it down, and they were processing everything. And she said to him, "You know what that means?" And he said, "Yeah, I know what that means." And she said, "Okay." Wow. You know what I mean? Just, okay.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful
thing. Yeah, at 16, he
gets it.
To have that where you're exactly right. It's not just an organ, it's life.
It's life.
You're
it's
donating
a gift of life.
The
physicians that perform those do nothing short of miracle work.
It is a miracle.
It's miracle
that you
work.
can do that.
But it's hard to believe that we're so dependent upon donation, either through living donors or cadaver donation. And, until science advances where they can reconstruct organs, or hopefully we'll get there. But
Stem
right now
cell.
it's a huge. Well, we can't harvest those anymore.
Right.
You guys are really great with the transitional topics. Jamie said we were going to come in here and talk about good Italian restaurants in the Mon Valley. But it's something I think that we need to take more seriously as a country.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot
Absolutely.
of folks, and these aren't self-inflicted wounds. My dad had non-alcoholic cirrhotic liver condition that was just genetic. He was in the Army in the World War II era, in the Vietnam era. Sorry, Pop. In the end of Vietnam, and he may have contracted infection. He was in a medical group, served in the States, but the doctors can't pinpoint why this developed in him as aggressively as it did. And so I appreciate you bringing it up. It's a nice opportunity to talk about really a great man and to talk about an important issue. So I do appreciate bringing my pop up.
How much respect I have for him, as a person and as a friend. And, it's again, getting back to that issue of how we grew up and we were raised in the Valley. He's a Valley guy, right? And you just soldier through it. You
soldier
get an
through
issue,
it.
you just and I remember it doesn't work for everything. So I had a toothache once. I figured, I'll just ignore it. It'll go away. And then my head exploded.
Right, exactly.
That's not the best fix for that,
work.
right?
Yeah.
Again,
So-
you're teetering at
Yeah,
fine
sometimes you
line.
need a little intervention. You need a little medical help.
But no, it's good stuff, and I think that we benefited. Let's go back to family, right? So you've got 3 active kids, and Big Will's he's a great athlete. He's a good kid, good student. He's playing travel baseball, and he's a hooper and all those different things. So what specific lessons do you like to try to impart, or I don't want to say wisdom or anything, but what are you trying to teach him that you learned from Jerry?
The answer is I can't teach him anything. He's 13, so he's already got it all figured out. And I say that somewhat facetiously. He'd be like, "Dad,
You literally
come on, Dad.
You beat me to the
Like,
statement.
what have you ever done, Dad?" But you know what? I've tried to teach him about his roots. I've tried to teach him about family, and the kids today have access to so much information. And it'd be my mom will pick at him a little bit. She's like, "Will's always on his phone." I'm like, "Yeah, but ask him what he's doing when he's on his phone." I had the coolest conversation with him a couple months ago. We were, I'm a lawyer, obviously. He's never been to court with me. Begs me to take him to court all the time. And one of these days, I'm going to put his suit on. I'm going to take him with me and introduce him around.
There you go. That'd be cool.
But, he watches these videos on YouTube of lawyers giving lectures. And I've never said like, "Will, I want you to be a lawyer."
Right.
In his mind, he's going to be Derek Jeter. And I want him to be Derek Jeter, right?
Yeah.
But who knows what life will hold for him. But I'm driving in the car, picking him up from baseball practice. He looks over at me and he goes, "Hey, Dad, can you describe for me, not explain, describe for me the no-knock exception to the search warrant requirement?" I must put the car in park. I'm like, "Wait a minute, give me a minute." I know these concepts, and I'm like, "Dude, where'd you get that?" He goes, "No, I watch these YouTube videos of lawyers giving lectures." I'm like, "You're watching CLEs. Like, I have to take 12 of those a year, and I'm always last minute getting them in because I hate it." Right? I hate it.
Nobody likes it.
For 12 hours.
Terrible,
But he watches this stuff and he learns from it. So he's already ahead of me.
That's great stuff.
But what I try to teach him about is his roots. Because I think that's what's really going to define the character that he and Sophie and Matthew, I hope one day will have. I talked to him about our family origins. My grandparents who immigrated here, one from Russia, one from Italy. I talked to him about those things. I talked to him about it, not just so he has a deeper understanding of who he is, but why he is who he is. And I'm often reminded, I carry that with me. Sometimes, like I said, I flirt with the idea, Tomko's got a great office in Baltimore. And I'm like, "Hey, wouldn't it be nice to live by the water?" I go eat crab legs, crab dip, fish.
There you go, yeah.
But I'm like, my great-grandfather didn't immigrate from Italy to Baltimore. They came here and they stayed here and they raised families
And besides that, you won't be right across the hall from Billy every day.
That's true. I need my Billy time. There's no doubt about it. But those are the types of things I try to instill in him. Just the values of being hardworking and honest. And that's the beauty of this area. People will work hard, and when they shake your hand and tell you something, they mean it. You may not want to receive it, but they mean it.
But it's going to be the truth.
And that's the thing. I think if you treat people honestly and you work hard.
It's decided to.
Yeah, how about that?
We must be doing something right because it's pretty interesting.
There's our audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, studio audience.
Till we find out it's nanotechnology.
No. We're not transitioning there. There's a chance Billy will watch this, and I don't want to be on record with that.
We're not doing that.
But no, I mean, those are the types of values that I hope he carries. And my parents and his other grandparents, they spend so much time with them that's awesome. Those lessons are just passed on, without effort. You know what I mean? Maybe it's intentional, of course, but it's almost effortless because they see that example, and I say that, my parents and my in-laws, they soften my kids, right? Yeah. They give them a sense of time and a sense of place. Yeah. And I mean that, in like the real positive way. So, and
that's important. I mean, as a grandparent, it's critically important, because I've been where you guys are, as far as, but a long time ago. My oldest kid's same age as you, just about, maybe a year or two younger. But
yikes!
No, tell me about it. When you listen, every age milestone you'll ever come upon doesn't mean anything until you realize that you're a parent of a 40-year-old human being. Wow. That's what hits you.
I struggled up becoming a 40-year-old human being. I get it. Wow, that's heavy. It's a tough world, but it's still a great place. And you want your kids to go forward and be more successful and do greater things. And
that's exactly right.
With all with everything he's watching, though, Steve, Master Criminal, you're going to have to watch that he doesn't go in that direction.
I know he's.
You know what I mean? He's already far ahead of you on the.
I didn't even know I wanted to be a lawyer until my last semester of college. I applied to law school. I applied to 6 law schools. I was fortunate enough to get into all of them. I hand delivered my application packet to Duquesne on the deadline date. I thought that's what you did. Right. I didn't realize people prepared their whole lives for that. Right. I was very fortunate, good place and timing. But whatever he chooses to be, I think he's got a prosecutor's mind. He has great relationships with the police in our community. I call him the mayor of Ringgold Middle School. And, he's a good example to his other siblings, too. So,
well, and I think it's so
I don't know.
Awesome.
I hope to vote for him. I hope to campaign for him one day.
Hey,
that's where it's going to be.
I'm signing up right now
for
that.
I'm glad
because he's amazing.
All talking now because I just have a funny feeling maybe Kenny is going to need either representation or some.
Hopefully, as an agent, you'll need agent representation.
Hey, I love your optimism.
There we go. That's where we're at.
Right.
That's just it.
But both of them being Ringgold alum.
Maybe
a discount on the hourly rate.
Ringgold, I always say this, Ringgold's an incredible place, and all of our Valley schools are. But they're all tough. I mean, you have to fight against an influence. And, I saw it during COVID. A lot of Will's teammates stopped playing sports, played video games, started running around the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Maybe got in a little trouble.
You get disconnected.
You get disconnected. From that, and you think about it, just the bombardment they always get. You talk about what my parenting style is. It's usually like lecturing, which my dad used to do, which I didn't like, and yelling, which is the result of resisting lectures. Right. But my wife's got this app on her phone. I don't have it. Admittedly, I rarely know my kids' teachers' names, and that's by design because I don't like to get overly involved. I don't want my personality to influence things. But I get his grades weekly. So in Sophie's too, and I'll sit him down and be like, "Hey, social science. What do you mean? You should be an A in there. Why are you in a B?" And they're like, "Come on, Dad, my assignment's not in yet, or this didn't happen yet." But, that's the world that they live in. I remember hiding report cards, and my mom's like, "Hey, did you get your report card today?" "Oh, yeah, I think it's somewhere in my backpack," because I know at 5 o'clock my dad's getting to the door, and he's going to be furious about my math grade.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, they just live in a different world. It's fast-paced, and they have all those things happening and in front of them at all the time. So you just hope you give them enough information and give them enough roots and background to make good decisions. That's
the key. That is the key. I mean, I was blessed to have the parents I did and grow up when I did. I don't know, when I think about even your age, right? When I think about my kids, oh man, how different it was for them, just 20 years after me, and then now the grandkids 20 years after that. And it's like, wow, it's actually, I don't know that I would want to have spent my formative years, those like 12 to 18, through high school, anywhere but when I did. And how cool it was back then. I talked about this the other day too, just this old guy reminiscing, but I remember like it happened yesterday, sitting on the couch in my living room, get the black and white Zenith television, watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon with my dad.
Wow.
Right? And just sitting thinking about that, the power of that moment. And then somebody reminded me that this right here has more computing power
Than what
sent that into orbit.
everything that NASA had at their
Exactly right.
They sent a man to the moon and brought him back. And we have more power. And
More
all my
power in our
grandkids,
pocket.
they have these phones, you know, and it's like, wow. And that all happened in our lifetime.
In our
right?
lifetime.
And it's just, but then the flip side to that is, I vividly remember the late 60s, right? I remember the riots in Chicago and Detroit. I remember the King assassination. And when you think about civil rights and race, we really haven't moved that much far ahead, right? We're experiencing the same things all over again. So while we have this great technology, we've made these great strides socially, we really haven't come that far.
Talking like an old person,
I
James.
am.
When we talk about the Mon Valley schools, though, and I'll stand by this statement because I was raised in it, you guys were raised in it. I think Ringgold, Bell Vernon, Charleroi, especially Ringgold, Bell Vernon, Charleroi, Menneson. I can't put Elizabeth forward. I can't put Peters. I can't put some of these other school districts. Those school districts, Ringgold, Bell Vernon, Charleroi, Menneson, and I'll stand by this even if you disagree with me, were the least racist schools. I would venture to say maybe, I don't want to say in all of Pennsylvania, but I didn't know race.
Yeah,
I didn't know race or racism.
And I think there's a lot to that. So from my perspective, like, you know, Charleroi High School, I am old because I actually was in that building before it actually opened, the summer before it opened, because my dad was a teacher, right? So we were up there and he coached and all those things. So that would have been like 1965 or something along those lines. But
You just don't look at.
when I was a kid, I can't keep giving you money. What did you
Just
Bunny
what?
not give you an allowance this week or what? You're trying.
I had to buy coffee.
Oh, okay. So, but at the end of the day, the racism that I saw was more directed. It was indirect, right?
Sure.
It was more directed at guys like my dad who didn't treat black kids any different than white kids. And when my father passed away, it's been 5 years now. The first guy that reached out to me was Lou Rawls. Okay, and Lou's a character. Man.
Did you know Lou, Steve?
Lou was a
Unbelievable.
great athlete. My dad was on Coach Curry's staff back then, and so I'm walking down McCain Avenue, and it was probably only a few weeks after my dad passed, and I hear this screech, and a horn blows, and I was right in front of the old Kohler Theater, and I looked, and there's this. Lou jumps out of the car, and he goes, "Bro," and he comes running over and gives me a big bear hug, and he says, told me he was sorry about my father and everything,
Wow.
and he said, I want to tell you about your dad, right? And he said,
Car's still in traffic.
well, yeah, it's right on the street.
Yeah, car's still in
right on the
traffic.
street.
That's Lou.
Where else would you put it?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Lou.
like, he didn't pull over. It's right in the middle of McCain
Right.
Avenue, Route 88, no problem there. And he said, I'm going to sit down with you one day and talk to you about your dad. He said, but I want to tell you this right now. In my life, when I was growing up, there was one guy, your father, who didn't treat me like a black kid, didn't treat me like anything. He treated me like a kid. He made me feel important. He made me feel like I mattered. He said, and I have never, ever forgot that, right? So then he jumped back in the car.
Off he went.
But at the end of the day, I would never tell you that my father, even though he was progressive, and I didn't see color, because he taught me to see that, right? Because he wanted me to understand that all it is skin, right? There's nobody. We're all the same. Everything that society tries to put in front of us to make us different is what makes us the same, right? So I always kind of try to not correct people, but I like to convey that experience, because when somebody says I don't see color, that's not true. You're being disingenuous there, because you do. Everybody sees it, right? But it's who accepts it and processes it and wants to take that moment. Because one of the other things he said, any chance you have to talk to somebody that looks different than you, that thinks different than you, do it. Learn about people. right? And I've always done that.
That is what life's all about.
Right.
Absolutely. But that's another one of those things that comes from where we're at and who we are, right?
For
Because
sure.
we didn't have to deal with that kind of stuff,
No.
you know? So that's all good stuff. But I want to get back to family. You know, we're all family guys here, and we talk. So let me talk to you for a moment about Matthew, because Matthew is. I don't know where Matthew's journey is going to take him, but if he's anything less than President of the United States, I'm going to be absolutely shocked. My man is just.
He is a force.
Oh, he's
a force.
amazing.
How
He's
old?
he's
5 years
awesome.
old.
5 years
Five.
Oh my.
Man, he's just a little ball of fire. He's hard to keep up with. You know,
I believe that.
having 2 kids, 2 years and 2 days apart with Will and Sophie, and then having a 5-year-old come along. You know, he's just a little force. He loves WWE wrestling.
Is that right?
And he'll tell you, if you were to talk to him today, in 25 days we'll be at Monday Night Raw,
Nice.
which happens to coincide with his first day of kindergarten, which he isn't even using as a reference
Doesn't
point anymore.
matter.
It's what day is Monday Night Raw. He loves to play baseball. Man, he's just a little cool, outgoing dude.
Yeah.
We've raised him, you know, I think part of it is like once you get into zone defense, you're no longer playing man-to-man, you're playing
Right.
zone defense. We just ran out of, you know, really out of energy to like closely parent him. And not like that we like let him run the neighborhood or anything. There have been 1 or 2 Amber Alerts that we've had to call in to Monongahela Police. One time he wanted to take a walk to Chess Park. No, he's just, he's a little force to be reckoned with. He's my best friend in the whole world.
He's a character. I
And,
love him to
man,
death.
He's witty, he's funny, and
Yeah.
he's whoever has him for kindergarten here in a couple weeks. Buckle up, they're in for a ride. He likes to be the loudest voice in the room.
Good thing you practice law.
Yeah, exactly right. But yeah, he's my little buddy, and you know he's excited. He's gonna start playing not travel baseball. He wants to play travel baseball. We're trying to keep.
He'll
him
get
up.
there, yeah.
But he did play spring ball, and he's gonna play fall rec ball here in a couple weeks. And he asked
Good
me,
for him.
Dad, when's my first game? When's my first game? But he's got a great coach. Will goes in the dugout with him. It helps all the other boys. So, you know, it's a cool experience.
And he suits up with Pittsburgh Premier, with Will and everything.
He's a bat boy.
He's a bad boy.
He works hard. Some of the parents will give him a couple bucks after every game.
Nice.
Which he uses to buy wrestling toys. So, but, you know, he discovered Hulk Hogan, which made me really happy. Like,
yeah.
that was like
Nice.
taking me back to my childhood.
Yes.
So, Jen texted me yesterday. She was in Target with him. And she's like, Maddie wants this Hulk Hogan action
Get
figure.
it.
I was like, get it. She's like, it's like $43.
Get
I
it.
was like, get it. Well, why wouldn't you get it?
Brother.
You know, yeah, and he comes
My
up,
brother.
Dad, look what I got.
Eat
I
your
got
vitamins, say your prayers.
Hulkamania.
Right.
Like that's just good stuff.
I
So, yeah.
remember when Hulk first came on the scene.
Oh my gosh.
And he beat superstar Billy Graham for the title, broke his leg. Broke Billy Graham's
Legitimately.
leg.
Legitimately.
Broke his leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, those got, oh man.
The problem is he buys into the illusion of professional wrestling. So,
Yeah.
like, we can't take him to any function where they have like folding chairs. Like, forget it.
because he's gonna
Now
hit
he's gonna
somebody.
pick up
Because he's
that
gonna pick
folding
up
chair.
He's going to hit
Smack
somebody with it.
over the head with it.
Right.
But-
I transitioned from this is terrible. I transitioned from the Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund to the Hulk Hogan era.
Sure.
I think every 90% of young boys go through the dinosaur phase and the
Yep.
wrestling phase.
I was way,
Dinosaurs,
way too
wrestling.
into dinosaurs
Right.
as a kid. Way too
So
into
Absolutely.
at the time, I don't know if I'm going to name drop here, but the Jimmy Snuka era,
yeah, Superfly.
I can't tell you how many things I jumped off of onto one of my friends.
Climbed everything was a wrestling. ring.
Everything was a wrestling ring.
Everything was a prop.
when my son was Matthew's age, right? We're watching WWE and it's Superfly and Hulk and the Ultimate Warrior and all these guys, right? And I'm like, you know, I'm Bruno, and I'll tell you about the first time when talk about not beating your heroes or anything. I met Jumpin' Johnny DeFazio, right?
Yeah.
When he was a county councilman and he
That's
was old
right,
and he
county
was all
council,
broken
sure.
up, and I'm like, that's not him.
That's not that guy.
And I'm an adult, right? I'm
Listen,
like,
our heroes and our athletes are allowed to age.
that's it. Yeah,
They're allowed to age.
And even I don't care what age you are, you know.
Except Tom Brady.
I wish
Yeah,
he'd grow
'cause
a
he's like
little.
older than me,
Listen,
and he's
as
like
a
he's-
long-suffering Steelers and Ohio State Buckeyes fan, I wish
Yeah.
Brady would age a little faster.
a little
than he
faster.
did.
Yeah, he's got to go
Just a
away
little
bit.
faster.
Steve,
Like,
this was going good up until that.
well, you're not a Michigan fan, are you? Well, I enjoyed being on the podcast, Jamie. You're doing great work here.
Listen, it's okay because
that team up north, really?
My grandkids are Michigan fans, and I don't.
Yes.
Football
I
or
bust them
basketball?
up.
Michigan.
Because I only knew them to play basketball.
If they had a cup stacking team, I'd
Do they
get
have?
the
Do
T-shirt.
they have a football team?
Oh,
They just don't win the last
anyway,
Saturday in November.
Back to wrestling. Back to wrestling.
No. I want to stay on this topic for a minute.
Jeez.
Listen, Caleb, my grandson Caleb will wear Michigan gear 364 days.
Child abuse.
That whole family.
Listen,
all of them, and
I feel like I have to report it. I feel like I have to report it.
And I told him one day, I've been to Ann Arbor. We took our basketball team, Stu and I, Phil Stewart, who I coached with, was one of the best dudes I know at Bell Vernon. We went to Eastern Michigan when Jim Boone had gone there. He was coaching there, so we took our kids to a team camp there. And Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor's right down the street.
Right.
So we went to Michigan. We showed them the big house. We went to Chrysler Arena. I get a picture of the guys there. And so then years later, I'm doing business in Michigan. So I'm in East Lansing. So I'm going to go over and see Michigan State. Never been there. It's a much nicer campus.
Awesome campus.
It's a tremendous campus. And I said that to Caleb.
No, I'm not going to argue.
But the big house, come on. I mean, that is
impressive.
not
Massive.
for the
It's
sense
impressive.
of being politically correct on the show. But I mean, listen,
Massive.
I do root for Michigan 10 times a year.
When they're not playing.
I
10
root
times
for
a year.
and I root for Ohio State.
Because you know what? My wife went
once a year I root for Ohio State.
My wife went to Alabama.
It's
right?
depending on if they play them.
Did she really?
She went to Alabama.
That's fantastic.
And man, she bleeds Crimson Tide, and that's all I hear about. How many
Yeah.
national titles? How many national titles? 18. I hear that all the time. So, as a proud Big Ten fan, I'm always happy when we have a dominant Ohio State team and a dominant Michigan team. It's just a shame they beat each other up going into the BCS.
Well, that's true.
Because
that's
then you
very true.
always have to
And-
look at two SEC teams.
To be
That
politically
is very
correct and give you the nod on this, they haven't beaten each other up in quite some time.
No, you're right.
It's
That's
been
true.
very lopsided.
It's been one, but you guys got them last year.
Well, and honestly, think about this. What do you think about? And again, I like to stay.
But
try
we
to
can all
stay
agree
topical.
we don't like Penn State.
No, not even close. Not even close. That's one thing I won't buy into. I
Bun,
refuse.
that was them. That wasn't me that said anything about Penn State. That was them.
I refuse to accept Penn State. To
Same.
even acknowledge that it's a state university. But what do you think about this, the potential realignment and everything's happening with the conferences in the NCAA? I mean, we literally look like we're going to two power conferences.
Two conferences.
And everybody else
and
is going to be on
everyone
the
else.
outside looking in.
And I think Notre Dame will still be part of the everyone
seat
else.
right there.
They're always going to stand alone as
Sure.
long as they can broker exclusive deals with NBC.
Until they get shut out of the Final Four.
I mean,
which is never going to happen.
I don't know. I think they have to change the playoff system.
Absolutely. It's
You
gonna
know,
it'll force their hand.
Shorten the season a little bit, eliminate some of those early season non-conference games that, frankly only pay schools to beat the heck out of them on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening.
Absolutely. It's a paycheck.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, it's with the realignment, the SEC only got stronger. And I don't know how it's the SEC and everybody else. And I'm sorry to say it to the Pitt fans who celebrated that ACC victory last year, but game over.
It's not. Yeah,
game
it's
over.
not going to happen.
Not
And
even
I really
in the conversation.
think that the Pac-12 schools coming to the Big Ten is a mistake. It's a different style of football, right? Listen, when you're in Southern California, you go to Wisconsin or to Michigan.
You might as well be on another planet.
Go there and just it's
I've been
brutal.
to USC. I mean, there's nothing in common with anything
spent
on this side of the country.
You know what? When I went out there to go to school, and the locals call that the University of Spoiled Children, USC, because UCLA is a public school,
That's
USC is a
right.
private school,
Right.
So, but anyway, so I just think talking about you have a son it's shown some potential that he could be a Division I potential athlete at some point. I mean, he's a tremendous.
Well, he wants to go to
baseball
West
player.
Virginia. He wants to be a Mountaineer in the worst way. So he's already got that bug about him. He won't hear anything
introduced
else.
him to the Mountaineer yet? Because that's like his one of his claims to fame is that he's personal friends with the last so many Mountaineers
and Dave Veligol.
and Dave Veligol, right? So like. Yeah. We go to the Fallensby Community Days every year. Our buddy Dave Veligol is the mayor of Fallensby.
Okay.
In addition to other things, great dude. Love David to death. And so the mountain. So they'll have a featured speaker, right?
Which they've had incredible features. Lou Holtz, right?
Lou Holtz was amazing. He's from Fallensby, right? And he got a room of 100 people to stand up and sing the Notre Dame fight song with him.
Did anybody really know the words?
No.
Because one of my best friends and former business partner, Troy Ridgely, was a national champion at Notre Dame, went on to play NFL, and he didn't know the words. So we always, anytime he'd say something silly, we'd hum the Notre Dame fight song.
That's great.
But no, I don't think anybody actually knows the words.
Son of Ambridge, another guy that other River Valley, but made it to the pros. So, we got a lot of good stories around here.
We do. And so, but it's awesome. And I'm a big fan of WVU. I actually look at where we're at here. Okay, WVU is probably our local school. I mean, we're as close. We can get there probably faster.
Faster with 43. Now that 43 is finally extended, right?
And there's not a lot.
I thought there'd be flying cars, by the way, before that road was ever finished.
I know.
That's funny. Listen, that is really funny.
The first project I worked on in the engineering business in the early 80s, I did the corridor location study for Westmoreland Engineering. We were right up on a hill. We did the corridor location study for 43 from 51 all the way down to Morgantown, right to 68. What they did, they called me in. They gave me a stack of legal pads and pencils, okay? And I went out. My job was to drive 3 different routes. They had red, green, and blue lines, right? So I would drive them, time it, then I would go out in specific intersections.
Wait, so you're the one that laid that circuitous,
it's almost exactly
road, really?
It's almost exactly on the one route that it was. But I spent an entire summer doing that. That was the technology at the time: pencils and legal pads.
So
just thinking of trucks. Okay, truck. You just put it. But that's how long that took.
Sure.
So I'm talking about
generation,
from like 82, 83
generation.
to when it actually was built.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
My friend Roger Fisher, he was a longtime state rep, passed away a few years ago. But he made a great comment. He was in the legislature when they dedicated the toll plaza at 43. And his announcement in front of the governor and the delegation assembled was, I'm paraphrasing, he said something to the effect that the ribbon you're cutting is longer than the road you're dedicating. and for the longest time, that was true.
That was true.
But I'm glad that our legislators finally finished the road and going through the final phases, because that will be a lifeblood. I mean, think about it. We could be in Morgantown in 45 minutes to an when
Like I said, it's
it was a day's journey before.
Right.
Yeah, it was an all
journey.
It was an all-day journey. Yeah, up and down and around. So, in closing, I want to apologize to you for Swaggy B, my man Bruce Fletcher, because he has gotten to the point where agitating you on social media has become his hobby.
Right,
yeah, he's and Bruce, for people's benefit and yours, was a mentor of mine. I met Bruce. He hired me at Chester Engineers, late 90s, and to say he's a character is kind of but
he's hilarious.
Steve's dad Jerry and I worked together there, and we had adjoining offices, and he lives, his one and only hobby is to just agitate people, right?
I love this guy already.
And it's usually me. It's usually me. He tags me in posts, so I can't ignore him.
What's your buddy's name that he interacts with?
Bill Reiner. Yeah, from Erie. Those guys.
He acts like that's his best friend. He calls him Wild Bill. And I said, you realize that guy thinks you're an idiot too. I said,
no, they just like the banter. I mean, it's it's sport for them. They love it.
That's what it is. So, and he will, but he's got a heart of gold, right? And he loves Steve and his folks and everything. And then, so I'll get a Facebook messenger. He always sends me. He says, "Hey, check this out. Let me know what you think. I'm going to do a post." So now I know.
I feel like there's a setup here. Did he suggest a topic?
I smell it coming.
I smell it coming. This is the setup. I'm feeling it.
Right.
No. Well, there is that, because we have to touch. We got to touch on the one thing that he wanted, because he said, you got to have Steve on the podcast, and you got to talk about this. But
anything that Swaggy B wants, we'll do it.
And we'll have a Swaggy B show. We're going to have him on. I'll have you here too.
I love it.
Actually, what I was thinking about doing is having him and Darla on.
That will be the roast. That would be the roast. That'd be a great time.
This dude he's legendary.
I might just sit and take notes.
Legend.
He's legendary. But
I consider myself a semi-pro stone crusher, but I always love watching it professional.
He's had decades of practice.
This dude is well, you know, he had a 45-year career at Chester Engineers, right? He brought me in and became a mentor, and still is. And he was a professional engineer, licensed for 45 years. Never, ever designed a project or did anything in engineering in his entire career. And he wound up retired as the executive vice president, number 2 guy at Chester. And he told me once, I said, you really never did any engineering? He said, first started, he said, they gave me a study to do. It was $6,000. He said, it wound up before I even got done, it wound up costing the company $65,000. And they called me in the office and said, whatever you do, don't ever do that again. And I
that was the last day.
That was the last engineering.
No more engineering for swag.
But so he would orchestrate, because he was always, I think he was like 6 months into his career, he was vice president, right? Because just good, oh yeah, it's just who he was. So Chester Engineers in his career moved, I think, offices 5 or 6 times. Were never, ever more than 2 miles from his house.
That's influence.
That's
influence.
Because he was always the chair of the relocation
exactly.
committee, right? So one of the, I was a part of 2 of the sales, and one of them, the new CEO came in and said, we wanted all the senior management team to come in and tell them what they did. You know, what do you do here? So he called Bruce in, and Bruce said, this will tell you exactly who he was. He said, Bruce, he said, thanks for coming in. He said, I want you to tell me what you do here. He said, no. He said, what do you mean no? He said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, I'm the CEO. You can't say no to me. So I'm telling you no. He said, I didn't tell the last 2 guys that sat in that chair, and I'm not telling you. The guy looked at him for a minute, thought about it for a minute. He said,
okay,
enough.
Keep doing it.
Fair enough. Carry on.
It's what so that's who he was. But we'll have a blast with him.
But I still am trusting my spidey senses here.
Yes.
You lulled me into a sense of comfort with that very stirring, swaggy.
Ease into it.
So yeah, when's the shot being fired? Right.
Happen when you get complacent.
Right.
As soon as you get complacent.
Right in front of your house.
So
Right.
Swaggy is waiting with anticipation.
This is for you, Swaggy. Whatever
for us
it may
to
be.
talk about. Well,
it's going to be controversial.
Roy Jones Jr.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the fighter, the champ, and Swaggy's a fight guy. But he said he wants us to talk about the Brittany Griner situation, because you had some experience with Roy Jones, with Russia and all those different things. And so, I'm not going to say Swaggy doesn't like Russians, but he doesn't appreciate what's going on in the world right now. So he just wanted us to kind of touch on, what are your thoughts on specifically the Brittany Griner situation, but also the doing business and doing those types of things in Russia. Russia's
a difficult animal. It's funny how life works. I never dreamed that I would spend a significant amount of time with a world champion, boxing Hall of Famer,
sure,
in Russia. But that was a reality for me for a little period of my life a few years ago. And the Russian state is a very complex one, and the United States government doesn't know much about Russia and its internal operations. I'll say my last trip there, which was I think in December 2015, early 2016, Secretary of State John Kerry was there while I was in Moscow, staying at our hotel.
Wow.
And he was the U.S.'s first and only diplomatic envoy during the 8 years of the Obama administration to Moscow.
Wow.
So,
Really?
when I say, you don't just get on an airplane to go to Moscow. So,
right.
The evolution was kind of interesting. Roy's a globally known athlete. He had some friends and supporters who were boxing promoters. He was training some Russian fighters. Spent some time in Russia trying to advance their professional sports system. And what a lot of people don't understand, there's virtually no professional sports in Russia.
Right.
They gear themselves for the Olympics.
Yes.
Right? They have a cabinet level secretary that reports to the Kremlin directly about the direction of sports there.
Right.
Just things you learn in dealing with this.
amazing.
So, we started to have some bout opportunities, negotiating contracts, which was incredibly difficult because a lot of the sponsors we were dealing with are on Treasury Department watch lists and sanctions lists today.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Roy had an opportunity to meet Vladimir Putin in Russia in 2014.
Wow.
Putin is a fan, as most people know in the West, of combat sports.
Combat, sure.
But particularly of 1990s athletes.
Really?
Steven Seagal, the action film star from the 90s, has been hosted by the Kremlin. I always didn't understand why. What was the connection? Why do you want the fighter of the decades of the 90s in the mid 2015s, hosting them at the Kremlin? But you have to remember Glasnost and Perestroika, the wall fell. What did they see for the first time? Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson, who's done business there,
Right.
Roy Jones Jr.
Right.
So it was like really fascinating window on Russian culture. And they identified with a lot of our 1990s heroes. So Roy was given the opportunity to have dual citizenship with Russia. The mission that we went on over a period of many months was to advance relationships through sports between two Cold War nations. Right.
Sure.
So we were actually hosted by the Kremlin, stayed,
That's awesome.
at government facilities with Russian oligarchs. But their society is much different than ours.
Yeah.
Brittany Griner, unfortunately, is today's example of Putin leverage. That's all it is.
Sure.
For years, Putin has waited for high-profile Americans to make mistakes in his country in the few opportunities they get to go there to leverage the country through diplomacy, because Russia is not a diplomatic nation. You guys are capturing exactly why Putin's an opportunist. He knows Brittany Griner is a lightning rod in the United States.
Yes.
Half of the country wants to see her free, and half said, you disrespected our vets when you knelt. You deserve to be in a gulag for 9 years for
Right.
carrying on you a substance that you wouldn't get a traffic ticket for in the United States.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
With or without a medical card, with or without a medical
Right.
use,
Right.
you wouldn't get a traffic ticket. Putin is KGB. They're masters of manipulation.
1,000%.
I saw it firsthand when we were in Russia.
Right.
There's a reason, when I was in Russia, I would never forget. I watched Netflix the whole flight over, right? My first trip to Moscow. I check into the hotel, it's late. It's like a 20-hour trip, going through multiple countries to get there. We're staying at the Four Seasons, right? So it's not the Motel 6, one of the greatest hotels in all the world. It used to be a Russian palace, right? So I check into my room, I get out my laptop, I'm like, Netflix,
Nothing.
nothing. Amazon,
Nothing.
Facebook,
Nothing.
no access.
Right.
The Russian government is a
They control everything.
controlled state media nation.
Yep.
President Putin's words are infallible. I'll never forget this. I was at dinner once with a number of Kremlin officials. We had a member of the Russian Duma from Chechnya, right hand to President Kadyrov. We had deputy secretaries of state. We had all these folks at the state-sponsored dinner. It was at Kremlin office. President Putin was not in attendance. But when his own officials spoke of him, like we're talking now, they would say, President. They would whisper. And I thought, these are his own officials fearful to speak of him.
Yeah.
That's just raw power. So I think,
God,
what Putin's been able to do is take hostage American diplomacy, add a new channel, which is, if you want your WNBA star back, you're going to have to release some serious folks, international terrorists,
Serious-
criminals,
serious
serious,
folks.
Right.
serious folks. I don't care how you feel about Brittany Griner or her politics. She's an American citizen,
Yes.
held in a hostile nation. When we were doing business in Russia, it was before the Trump presidency. It was the end of the Obama years where there was enormous hostility, enormous distrust of America. Our goals to be there were to bridge the countries.
Sure.
Maybe we could, if we find commonality in sport, that's a
So
place
be
to
it.
start.
Yeah, so
right?
be it.
We're people too. When you meet average Russians, they emulate Americans. They listen to our music. They can't possess our currency. That's against the law. But they buy Tommy Hilfiger clothes. They buy Carhartt boots. Like they do all these things that they just want to identify with us. They don't want to be at war with us.
Right. And they don't really have an understanding
they don't have
of who
they don't
we
have
are.
a seat at the table.
Yeah, right.
And this is just another tactic used by the Putin administration. And in some respects, I think he dangled us out there while we were traveling as a carrot and as a bauble.
Right.
That's just the way the Russian government operates. It was a different era. We were hopeful that that things would normalize. Obviously, that never happened.
Right.
We've had 2 impeachments and congressional hearings over Russia's ties to the former administration. We have a hot war in the Ukraine. So I feel for Brittany Griner and her family and the people that care
absolutely.
about her.
You have to. You have to.
that person could be anyone who entered Russia's space
Could be anybody.
to do business.
And
Could be
again, like
anybody.
you said, the key here is that she's being held all this time for something that wouldn't even be a crime in this country.
And President Putin knows that she's polarizing. So
Right.
he could use that as a further wedge through social media campaigns, Russian
Sure.
bots. Go
Sure.
on Twitter and read the comments that you'll
Yeah.
see from these anonymous
Yeah.
Russian bot farms, right? That they're just put out, war criminal, drug trafficker.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's
It's-
describing her in that fashion.
it's
She had a
crazy.
little vial of, condensed
Vape,
vape gel. That was it.
That was it.
But,
It's crazy.
Swaggy, thanks for bringing up a question. I hope I satisfied. I hope I gave you a satisfactory answer. But I always thought, Swaggy was a little bit of a Putin apologist too.
Swaggy is he
And
goes
Putin's an
whatever
easy-
way the wind blows him.
Putin's an easy person to flirt with.
Well,
right?
he
Because
is. Yeah.
he
Look, if you look at
he checks boxes
The-
that
the-
a lot of Americans like to see. He's
Right.
authoritative, he's strong, he's
From a-
nationalistic, militaristic,
from
all
a
those things.
patriarch perspective, it's 40 degrees out. This guy's on horseback with no
Yeah.
shirt on. He's 70 degrees. He's a black belt Brazilian
Ready to
jiu-jitsu-
wrestle a
Ready to
bear.
wrestle a
Oh,
bear
yeah.
at any given
Yeah.
time. What's not to like about
Well,
you know?
but
I mean, this
he's-
guy's like fascinating. As
He is what a large segment of our population wants to see in our own president.
Sure, we do. We want to see that
yeah.
that macho.
and it's
Right, and
It
we
sounds
haven't had
sexist,
that.
but it's a testosterone fueled dictators. That you look at this guy and you're like, look, if something goes down, I'm not sure Grandpa Joe's going to get this done. Like this Putin guy's going to get the job done. Like something's going to
Yeah.
happen. He's going to do something.
the sad thing is, though, he's costing his own country, their young people.
Oh, without
my
question.
goodness.
and it's just interesting how Russia's evolved. I mean, they lost more people in World War II than any of the other Allied nations combined.
And
I mean,
half by their own hand.
half by their own hand. I mean, it's remarkable the sacrifice. And my grandfather was born in Ukraine. Interestingly, his family immigrated to Canada because when the Russian Revolution occurred, the United States was doing its first America First crusade
Yeah.
when you wouldn't let immigrants into our country. So
sure.
they settled outside of Buffalo, New York, across the Canadian border before they made their way here. So going back to Russia and being able to connect with that roots was sort of an interesting experience
Yeah,
for
that
me.
had to be cool.
I
That
will
had to be
not
very cool.
apply for any more Russian visas. I know that. It's made it very difficult for me to get around airports. My wife jokes all the time because we went to Spain last year for a little trip, and we're getting in at the gate in Barcelona, and she's like, "I can't believe it! You made it through security without any problem." Sure enough, here comes over border control agent, takes me in. They're dumping my suitcase out. Why? Because I have a passport book full of Russian visas. It's just it's a complicated place. I don't think
is,
it'll ever
sure.
be solved in our lifetime. Russia's not a country that's destined for reform. It's
Right.
not democratic.
Right.
They masquerade as democratic. They'll never be democratic. They're people they're used to dictatorships and imperialism, and
Yeah.
we're seeing it play out. So
That's their history.
it's a frightening world.
It is.
It's frightening to think that we're an episode away from a global hot war again.
Yeah.
Well, with Russia and China and everything, and even India, when you look at international relations, I think we've taken a step backwards. We really have, and I don't know if that's been forced on us because of what these other nations have been doing, but it's a scary thing when you really think about it. If you dig deep into it, and again, you've got that unique perspective. I've never been to Russia. I have
Right.
never had any desire to go to Russia.
It's an incredible place, though.
But-
It
but
truly is an incredible
Everybody
place.
says that. Yeah, everyone who's ever been there has said it's a beautiful place. It's an amazing place. That the people, the men on the street, they're just
They are us. They're no different than us.
exactly. So that's
Their nation's ambitions are just different
We
than us.
we
Right,
were going
right.
to have a chance 2 years ago. Kenny was going to go to Finland to play for the U.S. And I have to give a shout out to
I've heard about this.
one of our biggest fans of this podcast. I have to give a shout out, Igor Semenov, one of our hockey
Yeah,
dads.
Dr.
Billy knows him
Igor.
well. He listens to us, watches us religiously. If we brought up Russia and I didn't shout out to Igor,
Wish to you, Igor.
yeah. But we were going to go to Finland, and Igor said, you have to go 3 hours. You're going to love it. And he said, you have to get to Russia. You have to get to Russia. you have to get to Russia. And
well, we're supposed to be right now, right? Or it was around this time for the Czech Republic.
Czech Republic.
Right?
They keep canceling everything.
My grandson Caleb made the USA team right this year.
Wow,
he was supposed
that's
to go.
amazing.
So if you talk to Caleb, he hates Putin
because he canceled his trip.
He canceled because
ours was COVID, and then
right?
now this first one was COVID. Now this one is
because of this Ukraine situation.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think if we were able to normalize,
you have a far better understanding than myself, probably, Jamie. Is it more volatile right now globally than we think it is?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I don't profess to have subject matter experience.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking.
But you know what? I mean, I was a history major in college. I studied World War II history. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of the same trends with fierce nationalism, attempts to regain ground. Right? This is a ground
you
and
hit
blood
the nail on the
war.
head. You're exactly
This is a ground
right.
and blood war.
You're exactly right.
Those are 20th century themes being repeated again. I think the nuclear risk is what changes everything. I think that's why you saw China roll out a little bit of sanctions and fire some missiles. You know, that it's why Putin's even said he doesn't intend to use nuclear weapons. He also said he didn't intend to invade Crimea, which he did do, and Ukraine, which he did do. So no, I think a lot of those Cold War themes are playing out again in front of our very eyes. The question is,
coming into play again.
Economy's coming in.
Just listen, the natural gas industry, which is near and dear to us, no matter what side you're on locally here about the Marcellus Shale and all of these things, natural gas is a major energy. Is a major issue, and it's become more of a major issue because of this war, because of the Russian natural gas.
Which is exactly why we're sanctioning Rosneft. Rosneft was actually one of Roy's biggest sponsors when we did business there, Russia's largest gas company.
Right.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. I'll tell you a quick story about how volatile the Russian economy is. So one of our first trips when we touched down, we were there for about 3 weeks. First thing you do, it's unlawful to possess American currency. Can't do it. Destabilizes their economy. You cannot have
like
it.
criminal offense.
Criminal offense. So you make arrangements to go to a bank, take your Visa, take your documented Visa, not your Visa card, take your currency and exchange it. I think my first trip, we were getting roughly 50, 52 rubles per dollar. 3 or 4 weeks later, the exchange rate was like 130 rubles to dollar. So imagine you're just a typical Russian citizen who's got $1,000 savings in the bank. Because of economic pressures and sanctions,
it's $400.
Either goes up or it
goes down.
Right? Yeah. That's how volatile it was. So imagine like trying to set a home budget.
Oh my goodness.
You know what I mean? Rent an apartment, lease a car, put your kid in private school. Impossibility.
You can't do it.
And that's why I think these sanctions have been so targeted the way they have been is because it does cripple the Russian economy.
Yeah.
And without those funds,
fragile.
you can't fund a war.
Yep. Oh, man. Well, listen, dude, we've been talking a while. I
appreciate the chance to come on. This is a lot of fun, guys.
We've touched on just about everything I think we possibly can. I don't know that there's anything left. This was a great conversation, but thanks you, my man.
Jamie.
I love
really
you.
enjoyed being on with you guys. Awesome time.
Take care.